Welcome if you're just joining us for the Teaching with Tinkercad webinar. We are so excited that you're here. We have a really exciting topic for our last episode of this season on the topic of cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset with your students. So just to begin, we wanted to warm it up in the chat so that you can all introduce yourselves to each other. And maybe, even say where you are located right now. And also just to start thinking about the topic for tonight and thinking about how you might bring it to your students in your classrooms. So the question is, what are some words? So it could just be a word. It could be, an adjective, or it could be a noun. But what are some words you might use to describe what it means to be an entrepreneur to students? So please let us know in the chat. And we'd like to keep this as much of a discussion as possible. It's always exciting to see what you all have to say about the topics. Daria, anything so far?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Oh, I'm seeing one from Jeffrey, an inventor, an innovator, innovative. Innovation is key. So we're definitely seeing a theme here on innovation. A risk taker. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Creative. Problem solving, self-motivated, creator, a maker, business owner.
We clearly have some teachers in the house.
Absolutely. Bernadette is saying money, going straight for it, starting something new, thinking outside the box, a rule breaker, being hungry, seeing a niche that needs a thing, a business person, another risk taker, being curious, a contrarian, Shark Tank, and an owner.
You guys are on point tonight. Wow, that's impressive. And yeah, just even like examples, like Shark Tank is an example that I see a lot of teachers bring to students just as like it's something that's familiar to them. And we're going to be talking a lot tonight, just kind of thinking about these ideas of, what are not just like the words we would use to describe an entrepreneur, but, what are some mindsets that are really important to cultivate and to foster in students in order to help them kind of benefit from seeing the world in this way. It's kind of like a lens, I feel like, of viewing the world as well. You can be an entrepreneur in many ways.
Absolutely. And I think the theme from tonight is there's not just persistence or being gutsy, taking risks, but also creativity and problem solving, and a lot of aspects for you to run and solve the problem in your own way.
Awesome. And Daria is an entrepreneur. So we're going to be hearing from Daria tonight, and we're going to be hearing from a whole illustrious panel of entrepreneurs, and we hope that you will find some inspiration from their stories and even bring some of their stories to your students. So we're going to get started with the formal program. So again, this is our last episode of the school year. So this is the Teaching with Tinkercad webinar series. Tonight's topic is Cultivate an Entrepreneurial Mindset with Tinkercad. To introduce myself, my name is Kellyanne Mahoney. I'm a youth program specialist at Autodesk. I was also a teacher in the Boston Public Schools for about 13 years before I joined Autodesk. I'm also a national board certified teacher. Daria, did you want to say hi?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Daria Zhao. I'm the youth product marketing manager for Autodesk. So working on Tinkercad, Instructables, and Fusion 360 in high schools. And we are both very excited to be joined by all of our illustrious guests tonight.
Thank you, Daria. And do please, we hope that even though this is the last episode of the season, we hope that you stay connected with us even through the summer. So you can do so using the hashtag TinkerTogether. You can also connect with us on social. So here are some of our handles for Tinkercad, for Instructables, and also Autodesk EDU. So excited tonight to announce our list of guests, beginning with James Develin, who is an entrepreneur and also a retired NFL player and 3-time Super Bowl champion. He also studied mechanical engineering at Brown as well. So we'll hear a little bit about James and his newest kind of vision for his entrepreneurial venture. Next, we're going to hear from Vicky Wu Davis, who is an entrepreneur. She is also a video game aficionado. She has lots of experience in the video game industry. And she's also an educator, a wonderful educator, and a founder of yCITIES, which is a nonprofit that's located in the Boston area that supports students in cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset. We are also so excited to welcome some of Vicky's students tonight, her illustrious alumni, Joanna Lin, who still is, part of the yCITIES network, and she helps yCITIES with marketing and community relations. She's also a high school student in Boston. We're also joined by Davidson Guerrier, who is a mechanical engineering student who also supports yCITIES as the Alumni Relations Manager. And last but not least, Emma Boyd, who is also a college student studying political science, and she's a communications manager and a yCITIE alum. So before we get started, I just wanted to just continue to encourage you to connect with each other in the chat. We hope that this is engaging and lively for you. We'd like for this to be a, not just a one-way conversation, but you have multiple ways of participating. So do know that you can ask questions in the chat as well. And this fine crew of Autodesk education people and our teammates are behind the chat answering your questions. So if you have questions during the webinar itself, do please feel free to ask those questions and get them answered. And also at the end, we will have a live question and answer as well. So our goals for the evening are to help you foster an entrepreneurial mindset among your students using Tinkercad. We hope that from tonight's stories that you hear, you can make connections and bring those connections to your students through projects that you might teach them. We also hope that this helps you synthesize your understanding of the entrepreneurial mindset with related concepts like the prototyping process and design thinking. And again, we really hope that you stick around for the end so you can ask questions to all of our guests and also to the Tinkercad team. So before we begin, Daria, did you want to take a pulse of the room?
Yes, please. So before we begin, we typically ask this question, so you might be familiar if you've been in prior webinars with us, but we just wanted to get a sense of how often you use Tinkercad. Are poll participants able to see the poll right now?
I can't see the poll right now, Daria.
Okay. Well, I think we're having a little bit of difficulty launching it, so why don't we respond in the chat for how often you use Tinkercad, whether you're totally new to Tinkercad, in which case, welcome, whether you use it once a year, maybe once a quarter or semester, almost every quarter or semester, or almost every week.
And you can tell Daria has this entrepreneurial mindset of pivoting and coming up with a new plan. So thank you, Daria, for doing that. And thank you, participants, for sharing this vital information with us in the chat. So this is what our agenda looks like this evening. It's very iterative in the spirit of entrepreneurial mindset. We're going to begin by Daria and I are going to talk a little bit about why you might use Tinkercad and combine it with entrepreneurial mindset for your students in your classroom. Next, we're going to hear from James, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about his entrepreneurial journey from the NFL into his newest venture and how he was able to take an idea and bring it to reality. Next, we're going to hear from Vicki, who's going to talk about how she teaches entrepreneurial mindset and the prototyping process to her students. And then you're going to hear from some of her students about how they took that and brought it into action and into the real world. So to begin, we're just going to talk a little bit about why you might combine Tinkercad with teaching entrepreneurial mindset. So if you've never visited Tinkercad before, and maybe some of you haven't, that's great. We're so happy that you're here. Tinkercad is a free, easy-to-use web app that equips the next generation of designers and engineers, I would even say innovators, with the foundation skills for innovation. So 3D design, electronics, and coding. So Tinkercad works quite well and on almost any device, including Chromebooks. You could also use it on iPads as well. And one of the really fun features of using Tinkercad on an iPad is you can actually unleash your designs into the real world using the augmented reality feature. If you've never seen Tinkercad before, most people are most familiar with the 3D editor, and all you're doing is just dragging and dropping shapes onto the work plane, combining them to make more unique and interesting shapes. You might subtract from them in order to make holes, and you might then 3D print your designs. But what are you going to hear tonight is there are many ways that students can share their ideas and use Tinkercad beyond just 3D printing.
Perfect. And so some of those examples that we see here, and we just pulled a very random selection from Twitter. So this isn't like, the beacon of any of these projects, but it's simply what an everyday teacher can do. And so we've seen some great applications of Tinkercad with circuits, so simulation, and there's no hardware required, which is fantastic for virtual teaching as well. We've seen great collaborations with Tinkercad using robotics, but also building. So building design, architecture, just starting to design your own room, for example. And then of course, we've also seen devices and simple product design in Tinkercad. So we're seeing earbud holders and other devices for accessibility too. Another thing we get a lot from teachers, of course, is the need for project-based learning. So PBL, we understand, is super important in the classroom to empower students and prompt them to identify problems they care about, bringing in culturally relevant context and their lived experiences to solve problems. And so one of the things I personally love about Tinkercad is that because you're starting with essentially a blank slate, if you're not tinkering on existing design, what you can do is bring your own imagination, your own experiences, your own culture, your own perspectives to create an authentic solution that works for you and your context. So PBL is super important to us, and we hope to apply that also with our design thinking and all the content that we have with Tinkercad. One of the examples, of course, is with how we integrate these design thinking principles in our lesson plans. So design thinking can be a lot of things to a lot of people, but for us, it's about that framework to encourage students to think about listening to the customer, developing empathy, what is the actual need and how do we solve that better? And so it's embracing that the process is where we learn and discover rather than getting to that final outcome from the very start. So understanding the problem, defining the problem, and then going through that process. So these are some of the examples of lesson plans that we've co-developed with the Smithsonian Spark Lab. And there's more coming soon, but these are just a simple sampling of some of the lesson plans that are already on tinkercad.com/lesson plans. So please check them out. They're aligned to Common Core and NGSS standards. And we've seen great applications in all sorts of classrooms, whether you're a science teacher, a technology teacher, sometimes we've seen art teachers bring these into their classrooms. So tons of lesson plans and goodness for you.
Thank you so much, Daria. And I love how when you talk about, design thinking, for example, or project-based learning, there's many different ways of thinking about it and different frameworks, and there's not one right or wrong way of doing it. One of the things that I think is most essential, though, when you think about the entrepreneurial mindset, and what I love so much about, meeting entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial spirit, is they have this kind of abundance mindset where it's like, they see and they recognize the problem and they empathize with the problem, but they also, see it as an opportunity to do things better. Another thing that I love about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurialism is just the idea that, you could, when you hear the word prototype, for example, it's not something that it sounds like a fancy word, but it doesn't have to be fancy. A prototype could be a sketch that you make on a napkin at lunch to show someone an idea that you have. So, when we hear the word prototype, it's really just kind of a vehicle for you to communicate your idea and to get feedback from others so that you can make it better. And last but not least, what I really love about the entrepreneurial spirit is just this idea of how you can show creativity within constraints. In one example of that, I don't want to give the whole story away, but one thing that is really inspiring about James's story is how his newest venture involves using a shipping container and housing his business within 150 square feet. And tonight we're going to hear about how he's been able to kind of use his imagination in order to, make something that's really awesome for the people in his community, and also to think about now, how can I scale it, and bring this awesome vision to other communities as well. This also relates to a fun contest that you might want to share with your high school students, and it's all inspired by James's story and his newest venture, in which students would design their own creation within maybe the constraints of a shipping container. Here's just kind of some more information about the rules of the contest. It's hosted on Instructables. There are 2 top $10,000 scholarship award prizes. There's also 4 $5,000 scholarship prizes and 10 $1,000 prizes as well. And you can see that there are different categories for the top prizes, and also different themes like affordable housing, public spaces, outdoor classrooms, and entrepreneurial pop-ups. And if your students haven't used Tinkercad before, it's fine for them to just get started with this contest. We've actually even provided a starter file for them to use. So what could you do with that starter file? We can share the link with you in the chat. I think it's in the notes in the slideshow as well. And if they click on that link, it will bring them to Tinkercad. And if they already have an account, they can just hop in and copy and tinker. So I love looking at architecture magazines, and particularly shipping container architecture I find to be really exciting. And this is an example. It's actually from Taiwan. And it was a way that they repurposed a shipping container in order to create this pavilion to provide shelter for athletes and spectators in a basketball court. So I thought, how could I make this just quickly in Tinkercad? So this is just an example of how I went really fast and sped up the video. And you can see how you can add landscaping. You could even incorporate some computational design by making the steps. And here's a slower version of that. So if I clicked on this design and clicked copy and tinker, you can see the starter file is already there. I'm zooming out. There's some notes in it, so I'm deleting the notes. That's how you do it. I'm deleting this shipping container. And then I'm going to duplicate this one that you can pull apart. And I'm zooming out so I can see what I'm doing. I'm holding that black cone at the top to lift it up the Z-axis, and I'm orbiting around. And then I'm clicking on that door, and I'm using the rotate tool to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm lifting it up the Z-axis. Then I'm using my arrow keys to move it out. I'm zooming in again because I want to make sure my parts are connected, which is really important in 3D design, particularly if you want to 3D print it. And then I'm just kind of spinning it around, clicking on it. And just kind of the modular way that this starter file is even designed makes it really easy to kind of make something that looks really cool pretty quickly. So I'm just using the arrow keys and then zooming in, seeing if it's connected, using that view cue. Doing the same thing, just kind of rotating it 90 degrees. Typically when you're using the rotate tool in Tinkercad, 90 degrees and 180 degrees are your friends. Sometimes 45 degrees is nice too. And then again, zooming in. I don't think I was using a mouse when I made this design, but it is makes a more enjoyable design experience for your students if they're using a mouse. But I was just using the trackpad here. So I'm using the arrow keys to move it out. Zooming out again to see how it's looking. Just clicking on that shape to delete it. Doing the same thing over and over again. So just clicking delete, delete. And then I kind of have a basis that looks pretty similar to that design. So then I'm going to add some basic shapes. And I'm going to pull the white handles to stretch it out. If I wanted to maintain the proportions, I'd hold the shift key, but I don't want to do that. I want to kind of stretch it out and make it taller. So I let go of the shift key. And then I'm just using the arrows to move the shape. Again, zooming in and zooming out to make sure everything's connected. And then I'm going to duplicate that shape. So I'm going to do, so a lot of the same shortcut keys that you might use, if you're making a slideshow or if you're, doing word processing, those work in Tinkercad as well. And what I just did next is I went into the snap grid at the bottom. Your measurement is preset to millimeters in Tinkercad. You can also change it to inches if you wanted to. I change the snap grid sometimes if I want to be more precise or if I want to move things more quickly. I might move it from 0.5 to 5 in order to move things a little bit more quickly. So as you can see here, this is in less than 3 minutes, I have something that looks pretty similar to that basketball court pavilion. And from here, I could show it to my classmates and I could ask them, what's some feedback on this design? Like, what could I do to kind of make it safer for people to use or to make it more accessible? So this is my final design. There's still some work to do because I think those stairs are floating a little bit. But you can see that, even if students are just starting out with CAD and they're in high school, they can make something pretty complex and pretty cool just using Tinkercad. So before we move on to our next segment, we'd like to know in the chat, what are some projects you might teach that could combine CAD skills with an entrepreneurial mindset? So we love hearing from you about these project ideas. And I know that all the other teachers that are here joining tonight love to swap ideas for projects too. So do please let us know.
I'm seeing ecotourism projects, submitting ideas for students that are 14 but maybe still in middle school, products and services, space colonization, pitching to the Lego company for a new brick design, environmental innovations, product design, robot or character designs, architecture, and designing an outdoor classroom.
Ooh, very cool. So they could submit their projects to the scholarship contest as well. and that's why, you know, the way that we phrased kind of the prompt for the contest is it might be something that you're already doing. Maybe you're already designing an outdoor classroom with your students. You know, if they're in high school, why not try to take it to the next level and try to earn a scholarship prize for it? So we are so excited to be joined by James Develin. I'm going to show just a little video to introduce him. This is part of our promotion for the contest, and it gives us a little glimpse into his story.
My name's James Develin, 3-time Super Bowl champion, currently cutting my teeth in the entrepreneurial world. This shipping container used to be sitting on a port somewhere. It's been recycled, repurposed into my new business venture. It's closed down for the winter now, but it gives me a chance to regroup with all the people and put this thing together so I can learn about how to make more.
Students, let's build a better world together. Check out autodesk.com/makeitreal for inspiration, learning, and scholarship opportunities.
You're such a pro at acting, James, as well. So James, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now so you can take it away and talk a little bit more about your business venture.
All right. Well, thank you, Kellyanne. Thank you for the intro. And it's always kind of a little embarrassing watching yourself, and especially hearing yourself talk. I hate hearing my voice. But yeah, so my name is James Develin. I played in the NFL for 10 years, 8 years with the New England Patriots. We enjoyed a lot of success. That was all well and good, but I retired in 2020. And then I was kind of thrust in this, you know, what am I going to do with my life? And before that, before I played professional football, I went to Brown University, studied engineering. Before that, I had always had a little, you know, just something extra in me for architecture, sciences, math. I really took to drafting and CAD courses in high school. Wanted to be an architect, but Brown didn't have it per se, so I had to kind of pivot, and I went mechanical engineering, and I think it fit me pretty well. I was much better at the application than the theory. You know, kind of labs always helped me out with my grades. But so now here I am, and I'm 31 years old, and I'm retired from the NFL, and I got to figure out what to do to continue to provide for my family. And so I knew I didn't want to go back and work for anybody. And that was kind of the one thing that thrust me into this entrepreneurial journey, is that I wanted control. I wanted to be able to, you know, I really didn't care about like being the boss and having all the power, but I wanted to be present in my kids' lives. I have 4 young kids, 6, 5, 3, and 8 months. They're rumbling upstairs. Sorry if you hear some things, but so yeah, it was really just about control and about the ability to kind of dictate my schedule, and also build something and show my kids, like, look, this is how you build something. This is how you can, you know, just put pride in a project. So then it was a long, arduous journey through COVID, which didn't help things, of trying to figure out what my path was going to be. I thought it was going to be fitness. I really looked into opening like a large square footage sports performance complex. That didn't really work out. COVID wasn't really a great time for those types of gyms. And then I looked into smaller style studio fitness facilities. That didn't really fit my heart. So then I just pivoted completely and organically kind of found an opportunity with a company down the shore, down the Jersey Shore, where I was living at the time, and ended up having an opportunity to purchase a brand that I knew well, and I'd been a patron at for 5 years. And so I was able to purchase Soulberry, which is, as Kellyanne mentioned, it's a smoothie acai bowl shop built out of a shipping container. They did a beautiful job. I had always admired it. And now having to, been able to do the due diligence in the business, it's even more admirable, the type of work that they did, and the architecture involved, all the tradespeople that worked on the project to get all the utilities into this container with 2-inch walls that are steel on the outside. I mean, it took some good thinking and some good work. And now my goal is, it's one location currently, and I would like to expand. I'd like to open up more locations. It's very Jersey Shore friendly right now because it's a very beachy vibe. It's got, reggae playing in the summer, and it's only a seasonal business too, which really fits. But I'd like to, continue to grow it beyond the Jersey Shore. So I'm going to have to adapt to an environment, to a schedule that doesn't, really pertain to what I have in Brigantine, New Jersey. So constantly just learning, constantly pivoting, constantly, trying to use a little of my engineering skills from college, identify problems that they've had in the past and how do we fix it? How does it really work into the small square footage and the problems we have with storage, and how much production we can make, and how many people complain to us that, oh, why don't you do online delivery? Well, we only have 3 blenders going at once. If we did that, we'd be swamped all day. So, and those are things that I need to address as I grow. And, what's my next step? Do I do another shipping container? Do I do a standard brick and mortar, but try to, design it in a way where it looks like a shipping container on the inside? So these are all things that I'm kind of contemplating for my next moves. And the entrepreneurial journey has been great to me, and it's just been an everlasting learning situation. And so I'm just really happy to be in the position I am, and to be able to kind of sink my teeth into something and kind of have the passion that I did for the game of football in a new business, and be able to, really try to build something great. And so, yeah, it's been awesome working with Autodesk and kind of showing my journey and been able to kind of capture it at certain points. And it's looking back, it's just been incredible where I've gone and kind of what I've learned about myself. And so I'm just going to continue to do that and kind of just pin my ears back and get ready for the ride.
Well, thank you for letting us join the ride with you, James. Your story it's so inspirational, and also it's like informative, I think, even for teachers. And when we share more of if you go to that link, autodesk.com/make-it-real, you can start seeing some of the episodes that we put together to kind of share James's story. So, talking about all just kind of the different ways of being an entrepreneur, from the tradespeople that were involved in building it, and also just what James is talking about, like, if students are interested more in like branding and logos, and really like thinking about, what is the essence of your brand. There's just so many different ways to being an entrepreneur, and we are so glad to be able to help James share his story and his journey. So thank you so much, James. And I do notice there are some teachers that are already asking questions in the chat. Daria, any questions yet? That was my next.
We've got one for James. So Lisa Shorey from Florida writes us and says, we just had a shipping containers shopping center open near us in Wesley Chapel, Florida. Are you opening one of the Soulberry locations in our area?
Oh, I haven't gotten that far. My next pegged location was going to be somewhere along the Jersey Shore, and I was going to kind of matriculate my way into the rest of the United States. So we'll see. Maybe in a couple of years. I got to get this one location under my belt first and really get it to a scalable degree, because right now it's kind of, there's a lot of things going that need to just be cleaned up. And hopefully I get down to Florida. I'd love that. And I've seen those things, and to Kellyanne's point before, the type of architecture that is designed out of shipping containers is absolutely incredible. Follow these pages on Instagram where people are creating, homes out of them and pools, infinity pools. It's unbelievable the type of creativity that can come from literally just a box. And so, I hope that more of these things are recycled and reused, because that just helps everybody in the long run. And it's also just really cool to look at, I think.
And also just thinking about, like, one of the things that we love about James's story is he really cares about the community in which he's placing his business. So thinking about, like, what, local resources and materials, he might be able to find in different communities to kind of replicate, but also still kind of communicates that vision of his brand. So we're going to keep these questions going. I'm going to share my screen again, but do please, James will be here at the end for the question and answer. So do please keep telling us, do it in the question and answer. It makes it a little bit easier for Daria to collect the questions. So what other questions do you have for James? And we will answer all of your questions, or we'll try to, at least, at the very end. But I do want to keep moving with our program. So excited to introduce Vicky Wu Davis, who's going to talk a little bit more about how she teaches this mindset that James has to her students, and also how she can relate it to the prototyping process as well, because we assume that a lot of teachers here tonight do prototyping with their students. So Vicky, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Vicky Wu Davis. I am an entrepreneur, tech and social entrepreneur, angel investor, educator, and activist, mom of 3 kids, and founder of yCITIES. yCITIES is a labor of love inspired by the birth of my older son over 14 years ago. And my initial instinct was that I actually wanted to raise a bunch of little founders because, well, how cool would that be? And there was a practical side to that reasoning, because being able to pursue your passion while making money is great. However, I know that not everyone gets excited about the startup world as much as I do. For example, my husband. And so I ended up hearing my mom's voice echoing in the back of my head, when I was little. She and I used to have a lot of conversations about acquiring what she called transferable skill sets. So useful ones, regardless of what I wanted to do when I grew up, what industry I was interested in, or what rank I was at any given point of my professional life. And so it dawned on me that if I focused on the entrepreneurial skills and mindset, that can then manifest itself in ways that suit whatever my children become in their lifelong and life-wide journey of learning, that, I would be very excited. So fast forward to today, and yCITIES has cultivated a robust innovation ecosystem from middle schoolers and beyond, where entrepreneurial leaders of today and tomorrow are leveraging their own experiences, lenses, and voices to make impact. Through our curriculum, support tools, and diverse network, we are pushing the boundaries of where innovation can flourish, the perception of what ingenuity looks like, and who has a seat at the entrepreneurial table. Can you go to the next slide, Kelly? Kelly, can you go to the next slide? Oh, you did. Sorry.
You did, Vicky.
Sorry, my brain's not working as fast. I'd mentioned I had a migraine earlier. So when someone says the word entrepreneur, the initial picture that comes to mind to a lot of people, not necessarily the ones in the chat, I was following along, there were some incredible responses to that, but especially young people that I talk to, the first word that kind of comes to their mind is business folks. They start a business, they run a business, maybe it's a restaurant, maybe it's some type of software. And while that's true, that's just like the surface of it. So if you scrape away at that candy-coated shell, you'll see that it's about solving a problem or fulfilling an unmet need. And while not everyone articulates it in that way initially, they are really either really unhappy about a situation, so it could be something huge and complex like poverty, or an annoyance like not being able to find matching socks after doing laundry. or they're super excited about something, from flubber to their grandma's recipe for like the best pasta sauce ever that everyone else is basically missing out on. But it doesn't stop there, because after the inspiration is sparked and the chocolate has melted, comes the core, which is the mindset that's developed through the entrepreneurial journey. Can you turn to the next slide, Kelly? Did you know that the #1 reason why startups fail is because they are not actually addressing a need? But nobody deliberately starts a business and proclaims, I want to create something that nobody will use, right? So the entrepreneurial process goes well beyond just having an idea or even making our product. An entrepreneur needs to understand all of the components of transforming an idea into a viable solution, to transform that then into a complete story, and then to be able to tell that story. But in order to tell that story, the entrepreneur has to understand what their story is. And just like grade school, you need the key story elements. You have the problem, understanding the anatomy of the problem and identifying parts of the problem that you want to address. The character, the folks who are you're solving the problem for. But don't forget the others that come into play. Call them lead and supporting actors, call them stakeholders, call them user, payer, buyers, whatever the names you give them, they can either help or hurt the success of your solution. The setting, whether it's geography or context surrounding the problem, it affects the potential solution. And finally, the solution piece, reconciling all the elements with an improved alternative. A product that is made but not used is not a solution. But that story has so many unknowns at the start. Every I wonder, I hope, needs to be converted into an I know because, or at least I know better now because. Can you turn to the next slide? So at yCITIES, we take more of a playbook approach when teaching so that we can accommodate the very non-linear nature of entrepreneurship. We have an M2M bootcamp, which is a startup clinic where students start with a personal connection to jumpstart their idea as a founder. Our L3 Innovation Challenge is a design thinking meets hackathon bootcamp in partnership with Boston Children's Hospital's innovation team, where we issue a central challenge and students role play as employees of Boston Children's to address the problem. And RAT Labs, which RAT is it stands for Riskiest Assumption Testing, where we leverage different types of prototypes to start replacing the various hopes, I believe, and doubts from the doubters with, yes, it does. Yes, it works. Yes, my statement is true, to de-risk the venture. Go to the next slide. So our programs are structured that way because the entrepreneurial problem-solving journey and the prototyping process go hand in hand. Making, in the maker sense, enhances the entrepreneurial journey because of its show and tell benefits. Whether it's brainstorming during ideation to kind of get it out of your own head, or communicating an idea with colleagues, or for data gathering, having the tangible is the key. On the flip side, entrepreneurship education enhances the maker movement by showing the applicability and the necessity of prototyping and how different prototypes have different purposes. Most students and many adult entrepreneurs too want to go to launch right away thinking that their idea is perfect, but it never is. And finding out that, at product launch, is very costly and a very time-consuming way to find out. So prototyping, however, allows us to find out critical answers like, does this look cool enough for teenagers to want to wear it? Will my 88-year-old father-in-law be able to figure out how to use this? Should we start with iOS or Android? Will this person pay for my product? Next slide. So while there are many different versions and names for prototypes, fundamentally, I classify them into like 3 types: looks like, works like, and Wizard of Oz. So Wizard of Oz is, in a nutshell, so kind of like a little bit of both with some manual manipulation to it. And each of these can be virtual or materials-based. And so as you can see here in these photos, we incorporate Tinkercad into our curriculum because it's an excellent way to create low fidelity prototypes virtually. Okay, next slide. So over here, we have a few material-based looks like prototypes. See how they are taped together and things like pen and paper and scraps are used. And I'm pretty sure everyone seeing this can get a sense of what the product is, even though it's very roughly put together. The point is to have a picture book approach to conversation, not chapter book approach, where everyone thinks they're on the same page, but are actually visualizing things differently. Next slide. So this is an example of a works-like prototype. And what you don't see here are the various teams, very different versions of them, as each team felt that their different materials and methodologies would provide superior water filtration capabilities. And a verbal discussion was really exciting in its own right that we had. But once the teams put their theories to the test, multiple iterations provided different outcomes. After the 3rd iteration, the winning team was actually not the same as the 1st iteration winner. Next slide. So how do you know when to use what type of prototype? It depends on what kind of question you are trying to answer. Like the ones I mentioned earlier. If you are hoping to see whether your elderly father can figure out how to use this otherwise awesome app, or if you're able to integrate your tool into an existing legacy system, or if a picky teenager will like how it looks, you're not going to create the whole product just to answer that one question. Yet it's essential to isolate the variable you're trying to figure out. I love this matrix here that one of my students put together during her prototyping journey. You'll actually hear from Emma later. Next slide. Understanding what you are testing for and what tools will be best to support the type of evidence you want to collect is part of the prototyping process. So over here, this is also Emma's, as she was trying to figure out which sensors and such were the best ones to test out her "I wonder" question. So this meant that she knew what she didn't know, which is actually a very important step 1. She knew also who she was testing with and what she wanted to ask. She also had the answers already in her mind because her goal was to figure out if her hypothesis was correct, and if not, why. Next slide. So I had mentioned earlier that one of my boot camps is a design thinking meets hackathon that we run in conjunction with Boston Children's Hospital. At the time of this particular cohort, I had just adopted my youngest, who's a highly functional but visually impaired child, and the design challenge was centered around her. In week 4 of boot camp, I brought her in for user testing. So that's actually the picture on the left bottom. And actually you can see her in their hospital bed on the top. Many students had made multiple prototypes by then. So teams were making mid-fidelity prototypes to test with her. And after some time testing with my daughter, one of the teams commented, like our technology works. If she could only read the instructions, our prototype would work better. Well, she's 4 years old. Most 4-year-olds don't read yet. And she's also visually impaired. You're creating a solution for a user like her. As I mentioned before, a product that isn't used for whatever reason that is, it tastes bad, it can't be used without Wi-Fi, the person doesn't have it handy when they encounter the problem, or can't read the directions, it's not a solution. Putting the entrepreneurial mindset to practice, though, Subsequent tweaks were made by the team, and after many more prototyping and testing, they had a Wizard of Oz prototype that my daughter actually really enjoys. And you see the picture in the middle is one of the students setting it up, and the picture on the right is her doing the test. Next slide, please. Quick and dirty prototyping to ideate, whether materials-based or virtual-based, allows folks to brainstorm and not get too attached to any idea. It's really hard to listen to feedback if you're too in love with an idea or a beautiful prototype prematurely. Eventually, you will like something and you'll want it to look prettier. Virtually, we like to use Fusion and maybe even something wearable. And in this case, it was 3D printed. You improve the fidelity as you advance in your process, and you refine it until you are ready to create the type of prototype that most people kind of think about when they hear the word a more near finished product. But think about how costly and time consuming it would be to make changes and tweaks to the 3D printed bangles if that was the first prototype. Maybe the next slide. So there's a time and a place for chapter books where our imaginations can run free, and there are other times when a picture book is necessary to tell the story. So you can put works like prototypes with looks like prototypes together to make the story easier to understand. Next slide. You can also mix and match prototypes to support whatever goal you have for show and tell for whatever phase. A lot of this also depends on who you're telling to, who the audience is. And so that can also dictate the type of prototypes that you use. There's also more than one way to do any prototype. So if you don't have this particular skill or that particular material, it doesn't matter, right? So from the prior example, the works like was a pencil sketch showing the flow of the process. And whereas over here, the works like prototype is created from a pile of scrap materials that I provided for the students. Next slide, please. So my oldest son was only 11 when he participated in the L3 Innovation Challenge that was about his newly adopted sister. And one of the design constraints was that the solution required the use of audio augmented reality technology. And our class conversation turned to the activities that my athletic daughter enjoys, including basketball. And when we brainstormed the challenges of playing basketball with a visual impairment and ideated potential solutions, my son noted that giving a device to someone that improves their spatial awareness and helps them navigate the court could potentially put that player at an advantage despite their visual impairment. Now, that may or may not be relevant for my daughter right now, as where she plays and who she's playing with affects the answers to whether or not the audio footnotes is a viable option. Beyond that, there's technical feasibility, wearability, and many other factors that will affect whether or not there's a problem solution fit. But the reason that his comment struck me so much is that my son was pointing out a potential unintended consequence of innovation. I find that so few people, regardless of age, ever think about what innovation can mean for other stakeholders, and even fewer about the potential negative consequences. And while he may personally be rooting for his sister's success, a potential stakeholder, perhaps players on the other team or other coaches or whatever other decision-making body there is, could veto its use. It's like making an awesome note-taking app only to find out that teachers won't let you bring the device into class. Entrepreneurship is a mindset, and entrepreneurialism is a skill set that can be applied in work or play. When life gives you lemons, start a lemonade stand. And when your lemonade stand runs out of cups, use bowls. Resource rich or resource constrained is often just a state of mind. And seemingly limited resources or unexpected obstacles are mere design constraints. An entrepreneurial mindset views through a lens of abundance rather than of deficit. In addition to grit, optimism and persistence. Entrepreneurship education also challenges students to become flexible thinkers who can easily adapt to the various what-ifs as life never goes according to plan, and initial assumptions are often invalidated. System-level thinkers who can connect the dots, understanding a problem's ecosystem and where new solutions will affect. Diverse thinkers who can look through multiple lenses and bring different perspectives to solve problems and seize opportunities. And creative thinkers who can execute armed with what they have, not what they wish they had. This doesn't mean that everyone magically transforms overnight, and different people click with different aspects at different rates. Last slide, please. So I believe that one's experience provides a unique lens on whether or not a problem has been sufficiently addressed and whether an opportunity to improve exists. Just because a problem has been solved for one doesn't mean it's been solved for another. My vision has always been to inspire and empower problem experiencers to become innovative problem solvers. By equipping young people with an entrepreneurial mindset, we prepare our students to be resilient entrepreneurial thinkers who will contribute to the betterment of society in their own authentic way. Over the years, I've been very fortunate to keep in touch with many of my former students, and one of them recently told me that the challenging environment that yCITIES stretched the fibers of her cocoon of comfortability and still continues to develop her as a person in all facets of her life. It's really amazing to hear how the entrepreneurial mindset has manifested in each of them. I'm really excited that 3 of my former students are here to share a little bit about their journey since being exposed to entrepreneurship. They are at different stages of their life and have different interests, but they have each been heavily impacted by the experience, and I'm so lucky to have them here today. So can't wait for you to meet them, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vicki. I feel lucky to have you here too, and I can't wait to actually move in to hear some student stories as a result of all of the education that you provide them. So we're going to just keep it going in the chat. So Vicki talked a little bit about the different ways that she explains prototyping to students and the many ways and purposes for different types of prototypes. Please let us know and let each other know in the chat. As we hear from the students, you can also just talk a little bit about how you explain prototyping to students. But I want to move on to introducing Joanna first. So Joanna, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna. I'm currently a sophomore in the Boston Public Schools area. And for the first half of my life, I lived in a pretty small rural town in the Midwest. So entrepreneurship and innovation were not terms or ideas that I could even fathom. But despite this, like my parents, who actually were restaurant owners themselves, so entrepreneurs, they raised a lot of money for us to go to Boston, which for me was like a vibrant hub, like teeming with entrepreneurs and new creations. But when I got to Boston, I wasn't really sure like what I wanted to do from 3rd to 7th grade. When people asked me what I wanted to be, I said like all of these different occupations like dentist, ballerina, but I really didn't know, even though like there are a bunch of passions that floated around me. Like I love making art, I love creating things, I really liked writing, I liked talking and like persuading people of my ideas, but I didn't really know what I could really use these skills for. So I guess the first place where I really discovered that I could really be a driver of change, like using the skills that I have today with me, was at this program that was recommended to me by my brother, that was recommended to him by a teacher, and that was yCITIES. And so I spent a lot of years there, like making different innovations, and I really learned different concepts of like entrepreneurial mindset and designing prototypes that it looks like, works like Wizard of Oz, like Vicki talked about. But for me, something that really stood out to me is the user journey. And I feel like having prototypes is really crucial, because what is innovation if you don't really know how your own product will work, what it will look like, and especially like how your consumer reacts to it? So being at yCITIES, I found that innovation isn't really as simple as just like putting a product out there. It's really like you need to understand your consumer, your user too. So in my second year at yCITIES, I worked with a team to design blinkers, and this was a glasses set that would utilize text to audio technology to read out text for people with visual impairments like Vicky's daughter at the click of a button. But when we first prototyped this and tested this with her daughter, we found that it was too heavy for her and the button would be kind of fidgety. And so we realized that we needed to continue to iterate and understand like the user stakeholders. So I think like the user journey is really something that I constantly put forward, not only in my entrepreneurial life, but also in a lot of other things that I do. So for example, currently I help yCITIES with creating a community online platform. So creating that through art, animations, videos. And so I feel like being able to have that user journey and how users really focus on that is also really important. And even for art and graphic design too, like I'm currently an owner of a wall art Etsy shop, and I'm constantly thinking about like, how can my users really have a great experience with my art? You might have heard the quote, like, a lot of people have ideas, but there are few who decide to do something about it. And so for many people like me and students, you might have a great idea, but you put it to the side because maybe it's a new product, a new passion you hope to pursue, but at the first glance, it like doesn't seem feasible because you're like, I had to get all these resources, these physical products. But I feel like yCITIES and Tinkercad, those platforms and organizations really teach you that you can use the resources that you have and the platforms that you can find online. And it teaches you not only this entrepreneurial skill sense that you can create whatever you want to create, but also in the realistic sense, like you can use these platforms and you have to keep in mind your user journey in order to execute your ideas. So how am I using entrepreneurship in my everyday life? So for example, I'm currently on the Boston Mayor's Youth Council, and financial literacy is a really big part that I want to focus on. So we're currently designing a database for Boston youth. So things like on Tinkercad, creating a community map of Boston and what areas are really underrepresented in the wealth inequality, and creating these kind of community visuals that really make an impact is something that's interesting to me. And I think that will really send out a message to people. And also just like on social media too, like I recently heard on Autodesk, there's a Maya platform and you can create animations, videos, and I can use this for social media, like how we're sharing about entrepreneurial skills on social media with yCITIES. And I've been recently thinking like about all the incredible possibilities I could use Tinkercad for. So recently in my English class, I did a presentation on the environment in Boston. I interviewed a lot of urban planners. So I think leveraging Tinkercad for urban planning, urban canopy, and understanding like urban canopy, where can we put trees around Boston, and preventing gentrification is all these like issues that we can really tackle with these amazing new platforms. So ultimately, prototyping, the entrepreneurial mindset, and the user experience are all very linked together. And so we really can leverage these platforms like Tinkercad and yCITIES to make a difference in the world and make our ideas into change. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And there is actually a map of Boston in Tinkercad that I made that you can actually extrude the neighborhoods in order to quantify data. Thank you so much, Joanna. Next up is Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma, and as Kellyanne said, I'm a freshman in college, majoring in political science and minoring in Italian. I've been a part of yCITIES since I was in 7th grade, so about 6 years ago. And I participated in the Alpha Innovation Challenge and the March to May Bootcamp, which are the two programs within yCITIES. And through that, I just learned so much about entrepreneurship, and there's really a passion that sparked from that. So much so that I came back year after year, just wanting to get more of that entrepreneurship and learning. And I started my own venture, Virtual Foot, which is an insole that goes in your shoe and connects to mobile devices if you have Bluetooth. And it lets kids play mobile games like, Temple Run and Subway Surfers using movements like running, jumping, and moving side to side instead of, sitting on a phone and just like using finger swipes. So that's what I participated in yCITIES with. And the reason I came back year after year, even though they're the same programs, is because each year they taught me something different about entrepreneurship. And we had L3 Innovation, which is very team-based and problem-solving oriented. I learned so much about how to, have that entrepreneurial mindset and that unique mindset about like getting around obstacles and finding a innovative way. And then March to May is more focused on storytelling and networking, which is an equally important part of entrepreneurship and something that can really propel your venture. And I was lucky enough to have Kellyanne come in and teach us about Tinkercad in class. And that was really one of the moments amongst many where I learned just how important prototyping is to the venture process. And I learned that it's really not just a one thing. It's not you build it and you're done. It's stages upon stages of different phases of prototyping, and each one has their own value. It's necessary to have different stages because in each stage you have to ask questions, focus on gaining feedback to move on to the next phase. And so I started with a low fidelity prototype, which is not too many details, just like a rough sketch, a rough design. That would show like the basics of my venture. And so from there, I moved on to a Wizard of Oz prototype, which it's a funny name, but it's a prototype that looks like it works. It's supposed to seem like it works, but in reality, it's not done yet. So it has the purpose of testing it before you put all the work and time and effort into creating the product. That's like the Wizard of Oz, because you have, the man behind the curtain. And so what I did was I went to a 5th grade class who was my target audience, and I gave them my prototype and let them use it like it was fully functioning. And then I in the back was controlling the game. So it looked like they were controlling it while it was actually me. And that was a genius way to kind of figure out what worked, what needed to be changed, and just get a true and honest feedback from my target demographic, which were kids and teens. And so Tinkercad especially would be incredibly useful for that. And I did use that to create more of a looks like prototype, which is a prototype that shows what the final product would look like without actually the technical components. And so it was perfect in creating that. And so right now in college, my interests have shifted so much because, I've grown and changed. And I'm actually very interested in politics now. And I thought that politics would be totally different from entrepreneurship and the two wouldn't coincide in the slightest. But I could not be more wrong. Last semester, I interned with a state senator, and I really learned just how much entrepreneurship is crucial to politics and virtually any field. For things like urban planning or public transportation or social policy, these prototypes are, crucial in figuring out how it'll work, what impact it will have, and convincing others. So it's really cool to see how entrepreneurship can be applied to other fields. And Kellyanne, if you want to flip the slide, this is an example of my Wizard of Oz prototype. I had my sister and her friend act like they were controlling this game and pretend they were controlling the game with their movements. If you see, they're jumping when the little guy in the game needs to be jumped. And it was me in the back with a remote control working the game. So something like that gives me the opportunity to gain like truly honest feedback from my target demographic about how they felt about it. So, prototyping is crucial in any field. And entrepreneurship is really not just partial to one field, but virtually any area of life.
And it's fun. Like that looks like a lot
So
of fun.
much fun, yeah.
Thank you, Emma. We're going to move to Davidson is next. We'll watch this a little bit as we move into Davidson. And do know that at the end, we're going to be doing a question and answer with everyone. So do please stick around if you have questions that you want to be answered live. Davidson, take it away.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. My name's Davidson. I am actually currently a sophomore at Institute of Technology studying mechanical engineering. And I can't, stress it enough how much entrepreneurship has changed my life. I grew up in Florida, down in the Miami area, And if you asked me during that time, what is entrepreneurship, I would have looked at you like, oh yeah, it's somebody in a room doing something, but nothing to do with me. I'm more of a basketball player. It has nothing to do with me. And then, stuff happened, life happened, and I ended up moving to Boston. And man, when I tell you I was in for a rude awakening, it definitely shook me. I grew in a more robust environment where I was constantly challenged to take a look at like tougher decisions and find out the answer to tougher questions. And I never realized what necessarily that is. So I remember one very fateful morning. Oh, here we go. Sound like a story. I had the opportunity of speaking on behalf of my school as a student body president to a few community based programs around us. And Vicki happened to be there, and she witnessed me speak about a problem that we were dealing with at the school and how we would attempt to tackle it. And I was given the ability to be invited to participate in one of the March to May programs. So me, of course, I love opportunities. I was like, okay, let's do it. And I show up, and finally, somebody broke down the idealism of entrepreneurship. So what does that mean? Entrepreneurship to me is the ability to stand in front of a problem and to digest the problem and create a solution to it. Now, the biggest and toughest part for me was, I love creating the answers. I love creating the solution to problems, but I was never good at, giving up my answer. If my answer came out, it's like, that's the one that we're going to use and that's it. And I remember it was doing one of the actual boot camp meetings that Killian came in and taught us a little bit about Tinkercad. And the idealism of prototyping, sprouted, and here I am like, yep, that's what I've been doing. I've been prototyping all these solutions and answers, and not once have I failed. And I'm like, you know what? Give me the problem. I'll prototype it. I'll show you what I mean. And I created it. And as I'm presenting, I'm like, wait, this isn't what I expect. This is what I bargained for. So I sat there and obviously I felt like a sense of defeat. And then I realized, a lot of the things around us are a failure into a success. It comes down to the idea of failure. Failure, there's no such thing as even the ideal of failure. It is the first attempt in learning. So therefore, when I sat there and I was like, okay, my prototype's not it, let me try a different one. And that's when I realized, I had this very bad problem where I would fall in love with my first prototype, and it would kind of limit me as to what I could get out of that. So now with that being said, moving on, you might get it. Thank you. That being said, it really helped me get to the point where I could explain to other people that, there's a lot of problems that are hidden around us that we come up with a solution of, and we say that's the right solution. And then when it's shut down, we just kind of just give up. It's like, okay, I put my best foot forward. I tried, didn't work. All said and done, I'm done. And being someone who clearly went through the same process, I had to step up and be like, look, your first solution didn't work. What's your second solution? Your second solution didn't work? Understandable. It's kind of tough. What's your third one? And slowly but surely, I started seeing the people around me come up with these amazing ideas. Specifically, I want to even say in the program that I had the opportunity to work with in Vicki, where the people around me would test ideas out and it would fail, and then they would test it again and they would fail. And then slowly but surely, they would slowly increase better. And it came to this, like, what you would call it, design final. And I used the same process in my engineering class. We took a design class, and the final was to create a kitchen appliance that would help with kitchen life easier. So here I am, prototyping, and I'm like, yep, I got this. And again, I'm creating my first prototype, and like, see, got it. And then I was like, wait, I learned this before. I know my first prototype can't be my last. And here I am, and I tried it again, and bam, I created a better one. And I was like, it's not enough now. I redid it again, and glad to say I passed that final with a solid grade. And it really, you know, spoke efforts into like what the idealism entrepreneurship had on me, and how I was able to implement it in a different environment than what I would normally implement. With that being said, I know not many of you guys, well, checking the chat, I know there's a lot of people from different places. I know myself, I was shoveling a lot of snow this winter. And I honestly want to know, you know, who else is like me and we were like, you know, shoveling with your bare hands? Because I did my best to shovel everything with my bare hands. You know, I had a shovel. It stayed at home. You know, I didn't really bring out the shovel or the snow blower. They were just kind of hiding. And for some reason, I decided to shovel with my hands. And that comes to express the idealism of what I'm trying to get to here. Entrepreneurship is not necessarily a product. It's a tool used to help us develop the solutions that we're looking to solve for the problems we're looking to solve. With that being said, if the tool sits in a shelf and it isn't used, then it can't necessarily progress and help other people and help you in a situation where it could be more useful and help you assist in a better form. So with that being said, I would say try your best to like really understand the idealism behind entrepreneurship and the ability to help solve solutions, as it does really help even the younger generation in terms of understanding, you know, that the problems around them aren't necessarily unsolvable. It's just going to take a little bit of work and a little bit of battles, and you know, it's going to be taxing at times, but the end product is always what's going to be worth it.
Well, I love your entrepreneurial spirit, Davidson, and I think that the students, you just wanted to share a little bit about your prototypes, the images of the prototypes that you made.
Yeah, definitely. So these are just an array of basic low-level prototypes that we've, all three of us have made of our ventures. So for instance, as a low fidelity prototype, we have on the right a drawing I did very early on about just what virtual fit would do. Obviously, it's not the real thing. It doesn't look like it has no technical components, but it serves as a way to understand what the impact would be. And on the left, we have where I'm starting to get into the design. And I have everything sketched out and sort of like where it wants to be and where I want to have each component. And then how it'll connect to the actual app itself. And I remember that during the Ultimate Innovation Challenge, I actually went to CVS and bought a Dr. Scholl's insole to be like a very low fidelity prototype. And then we took the accelerometers and pressure sensors out of a video game controller and taped them on with Scotch tape to kind of indicate where each component would be and how it would work once I had it finished. Obviously, it didn't work. There was no connection involved or anything, but it just served like as a way to get my point across and, you know, as like an aid to help people understand it. So prototypes can be anything from a very high level, almost working product to something very small like that.
I love seeing the whole process there.
Yeah. And Joanna and Davidson, if you want to talk about yours.
Yeah, so in a similar way as Emma, we also started with a sketch of what we wanted to do. So in the previous slide, I showed a picture of like one of the people on my team drew a picture of what we're envisioning. So that was really the first step. And then the second one was taking a glasses set. So these are like the Wizard of Oz prototypes. So where we took glasses and then I voice recorded. So the product that we did was a text to audio technology to read out text for people with visual impairments to help them read. And so just to give a brief rundown. And then, so what we did was take glasses and then I recorded a voice recording of me reading a children's book. And then we had our like panelists or our judges or our pilot users put on their glasses and then listen to my voice while reading a book. So that was like, it's obviously not the actual technology of the glasses, but that's how we really tested out how our users would be feeling while using our product. And so that was really helpful because it gave us a lot of feedback on what kind of reading styles do people want, or how do they want their glasses to feel, and like what are potential challenges that we see with these products. So I think prototyping has been really helpful for us just to identify challenges that we can't really see on our own at the surface level. So yeah.
Very cool.
All right, thank
Great.
you. That's all I have.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I love just even, in talking about entrepreneurial mindset that, one of the things that I found most inspiring is, it's a combination of technical skills, it's creativity, but it's also communication as well. So as we're getting ready for our question and answer at the end, please do share with each other, if you haven't started already, what do you find most inspiring about these students' stories? Daria, did you want to try out the poll again to see if it'll work?
Second time's the charm, right? So let's go to launch this poll.
Oh, it worked.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
we want to know, how likely are you to try something you learned in today's webinar? Are you very likely to try, somewhat likely, unsure, unlikely, or very unlikely? And that just helps us gauge our content and what we bring into our future webinars. And so far, I'm seeing majority participants, large majority, 70 to 80 to 90% are close to very or somewhat likely to try something new. So that's fantastic.
Very nice. So, and this is part of the entrepreneurial process, right? Is to kind of get feedback from your end users to think about how you can make things even better. So again, really quickly, we want to go into the question and answer. And some people were asking about the scholarship contest. So this is the URL that you can use. This one will right now directly take you to the contest page on Instructables, but perhaps in a few weeks, it might actually take you to where the contest is, but also some more kind of engaging content that students can access to build their technology skills, to challenge themselves, to explore careers, and also to find additional funding in addition to the scholarship contest. So do please keep that URL bookmarked because it's going to take you to fun places in the future too. Speaking of fun places to go, Daria, did you want to talk a little bit about this opportunity for our teacher audience?
Yes, so we are curious to know, among those who are attending, if there are any educators who are planning to attend the yCITIES Live conference at the end of June, so in about 3 months from now. And we've got some huge announcements to make there on behalf of Tinkercad. But in the meantime, before then, we're curious to know if you're attending yCITIES, and if so, we would love to invite you to join us for a fully funded educator reception with the Autodesk Tinkercad team. I believe it'll be one of those nights during the conference, and we will send this link both in the chat, but also afterwards you'll get a deck with that clickable link.
We are super excited to see you there. So, before we move into the question and answer, just know that you are going to get slides at the end of, after we share the email with you in a few days with the recording, and also, this slide, this particular slide has links for ways to connect with us. We hope that you stay connected. We also wish that we could give you the world, but right now, what we can give you is dinner at yCITIES, but also this certificate. So do please check your email. There is a PDF of the certificate there that you can fill in, and you can share, if you're using this webinar series as evidence of your professional development, for example. So we're glad to be able to help you with that if we can. So do also please let us know if there are any new topics you think we should cover if we do a next season of the webinar series. And also, do you have any other ideas? We are innovating tonight and thinking entrepreneurially. Are there other ideas or other formats that you could think of so that we can continue to learn together? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. We're going to go into Brady Bunch mode. And any questions? So Daria, you were watching the chat throughout.
Yes, before we jump to questions, I just wanted to give some feedback from the students if they haven't seen it already in the chat. There was so much positive feedback from all your content, what you presented, the embracing of failure in order to learn more and move forward, your passion, just the incredible ability to present your ideas and reflect on the process. So I think that's a testament both to our student speakers tonight, but also to Vicky's incredible program at yCITIES. And moving on to questions, we've got a ton for James. So James, there is certainly demand for Soulberry. Our first question comes from Lisa Shorey. Are you franchising your business, or do you have plans to do so?
I would like to pursue that option down the road. Right now, I'm going to keep it close to the chest because it's something that I just really enjoy. So I'm going to try to do it kind of in-house and keep it kind of like a family-run thing. And then if it really takes off, then I'll pursue it down the road. But so it's definitely an option.
And another question for James, thinking back to your school days, I know those were a couple of years ago. What were the ways that teachers supported you to build an entrepreneurial mindset?
Oh man, I think, I mean, my schooling, when I got down to it at Brown, there was the days where I was just clawing to just stay afloat. So I think a lot of it was grit. A lot of it was just like, hey, you're gonna have to figure this out. Like I mentioned earlier, the theoretical side of engineering never really like sat well with me. I would perform stellarly in labs and computer work and design things, but when it came to the actual math and science, I was just up there like just blank staring at chalkboards. But so I think it just kind of created like this creativity. Like I really had to figure this stuff out. And then, yeah, the grit to kind of go through some dark days where, I'm test after test, I'm the lowest test in the or lowest grade in the class. And hey, you gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps and figure this thing out.
It sounds like we all benefit from different ways to demonstrate mastery, and certainly you've found your niche now.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Hopefully.
Well, we've got one question for Vicki. Henny Allcamp says, Vicki, this is fantastic work you're doing. Would you mind sharing some motivational questions I could ask my students to encourage entrepreneurship in an area where working for high-paying mining jobs with low entry-level qualifications dominate the industry?
Can you repeat that again? I'd actually love to have my three students brainstorm that with me because they have the young person's view too, because I would give the old person's view.
Absolutely. So to simplify, could you share some questions for Henny about motivational questions that this educator could ask their students to encourage entrepreneurship? And specifically, just for context, it sounds like Henny is coming from an area where there's a lot of these high-paying mining jobs that attract folks because they have low entry-level qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe Henny wants to inspire their students to dream bigger, to think bigger, and to ultimately pursue entrepreneurial dreams.
Yeah, I mean, let me see if I can rattle this off offhand. I think that, one of the things that I do with my students a lot is really try to connect. So I'm a passion-driven entrepreneur, and I try to instill that with my students, trying to really connect beyond, kind of on a multidimensional level, the things that they're interested in. So traditionally, there's like kind of the three buckets of students that come to me are either one who are really like driven by money and want to make $1 gazillion. I have another bucket of students who are really like focused on social justice or philanthropy and want to, change the world. And then I have a third bucket of students that don't really know what they want to do and haven't really found their niche and haven't really thought about either philanthropy or money. And their headmaster or teacher said, hey, you should explore yCITIES. And so everybody has a different starting point. And I think that I take a concept of circle of resources, which I know Emma to this day takes that concept with her, and a little bit of mind map, me map kind of approach. And I actually use those two exercises to try and figure out if the students can then draw correlations between things that are relevant in their life and things that they are excited about or have some kind of emotion to that spark some kind of action. And that type of kind of high level question leads into and I think teachers are great about this, is taking that data received, that input from students, and then riffing off of those to get into kind of deeper questions. but the mind map is something that I think is a great way to start and think about, you know, things that they love about things around them and things that that aggravate around them. And some of it may initially be about, you know, coal mines and things of that sort, because that's what's relevant and prevalent in their lives. And that's okay, right? Because it's not about making a 180-degree change from their current thinking, but kind of almost as kind of an interconnected web to see what things can we associate with to then try to engage them in other things instead of just money. I don't know if Emma, Joanna, and Davidson have additional questions coming from a young person's view, what you think would be good questions to ask, or if you like that angle.
Yeah, well, just to expand on what Vicki said, I definitely think that she's absolutely right. And that just gave me an idea that another thing we do in Vicki's Elephant Innovation Challenge and March Bay Bootcamp is what she calls 50 Ways to Lemonade, which is where you have, you know, a skill, a relationship, and like a certain problem you have to solve, and you have to put all of your, or all of the components you have together to try to solve it. So for instance, if you have no cups, but you have a giant backyard and you have to make this lemonade stand, what do you do? And it forces you to think outside the box about what you can bring to the table with what you have and your passions. And so you could say, for instance, have a sit-down lemonade stand in your backyard where it's nice and have like reusable cups. And so it seems like the students you have are very like locked into what options they have. So doing an exercise like that to just get them out of their heads and expand their perception of what options they have after school could be very helpful in them, you know, deciding on something other than the mining jobs you mentioned.
And if anybody wants to reach out to me offline, I can provide a little more detail about the 50 Ways to Lemonade brainstorming activity we do. It's a common, and there's a couple of versions, but it's basically throwing in all the connections in a very divergent way, but very, you know, visual. And we use index cards, but it can be done in a variety of fashion, post-it notes or virtually. You know, kind of really random things. It's like word association, but like index association, your random strengths and interests, and even just sometimes we put in constraints too, like you don't have this and you can't do this. What would you do? But you have these, and you know, do that. So.
Well, we're getting some feedback, even in the chat right now from Henny, who asked the question, saying mind maps are great. And Dean also is saying they use mind maps to get students started on any project. So it sounds like that's a great way to get started. We have another question from Dwayne Johnson asking, are there resources to assist in setting up a similar type of student design competition? I'm assuming Dwayne is referring to the challenge that Kellyanne proposed earlier with James.
So this was could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, is other way, so for different grade levels?
Are there resources to assist in setting up similar types of student design competitions?
Well, there was, so we've been working with James for 3 years now. So the first year that we worked with James on the program, we had done actually 3 challenges that are in Instructables right now that teachers, like one of our past guests actually did this at their school. They used one of them. So we had one for elementary school that was called, it was like to make for everyone, and it was about like inclusive design, and you know, a lot of students designed like play spaces and things like that. We had to make it green. So if you search on Instructables, I think you should find it. Make It Green was for middle school, and it was about coming up with designs to address the issue of climate change. And then for high school, it was called Make Justice, and it was around like affordable housing and designing solutions for disaster relief as well. But within those Instructables, there's also like slideshows, there's rubrics, there's like a framework for how to host a design slam and actually bring, like Vicki talks a lot about, you know, getting outside feedback on students' designs and for students to get authentic feedback. So there's all types of resources in those Instructables, and Matthew is on it. He's got them lined up in the chat as well.
And hopefully those resources are a great way to just get started. And you can also adapt them as well for your curriculum.
Make them your own.
Exactly. Let's see. We have a question from Dean on, we usually use a design process that includes a design brief. Is there something like that that we could show an example of? So internally, I don't think we provide like a template for design briefs in Tinkercad today. Is that right?
I think so. I would say like maybe look at some of the lesson plans, have maybe some examples. If you go to Tinkercad Teach and look at those lesson plans, particularly like the Smithsonian Spark Lab lesson plans have a lot of interesting ways of like framing a prompt, like a design prompt.
And Vicki, do you teach with a design brief or anything like that too?
I not in the purest sense, but there's, you know, kind of iterations of it. So.
And everyone here will get a copy of the PowerPoint afterwards, so we can see some of the frameworks that Vicki showed today. All right, we're down to a couple more questions. One is for James. How did you motivate and realign your mindset when your first idea, which perfectly suited your recent skills as an athlete, was disrupted by COVID?
Good question. And this took a lot of introspective time to just kind of think and really like do a deep dive into like what I wanted to do, what was my biggest priorities. And then I think, you know, the students and Davidson really hit the nail on the head is you have to be willing to kind of fail and learn from those mistakes. And, you know, what can we do to be better? What can I do to just think differently and address a different problem and find a passion somewhere else? And then as I started to do that, and an organic situation happened with Soulberry that it just kind of like fell into my lap, so to speak. And then while I'd never thought that I'd be in food and beverage, I realized that building a business and something like this and creating like a team atmosphere, coming from football, I was able to really try to capture a lot of the lessons I learned from the game and utilize it towards football. While fitness was one of my passions while I was playing, bar none. And that's what I would have pegged while I was playing. Like, that's where I'm going to go. This is really, I feel like, more multidimensional in the way that it's fulfilling me. And so that's been really cool to see. And I didn't know that I would realize that until I just went ahead and did it. And it just kind of took a little bit of guts to say, yeah, I'm going to own a smoothie shop. Never would have, you know, pegged myself as being an owner of a business like that. But you know, it's really kind of come full circle, and I've had time to think, and I think that time was really invaluable to me.
Well, it certainly sounds like it's not just available for you, but for a lot of the attendees tonight. We're seeing Dean from the chat, Josue Hernandez, and the Q&A, James. You know, when you come down to Miami, Florida, can you show our students how you had your vision? They would love to hear from your process. So lots of new fans tonight as well.
Yeah, next time I'm in Miami, maybe when the Pats are playing the Dolphins or something. Yeah, I'll stop in.
I know we also had, just throughout the duration of this call, some questions in the comments about the product, things like adding new sensors to Tinkercad circuits. Christian and Darren, I know both of you were busy answering those. Are there any questions you'd like to share just for the benefit of those watching later on?
Oh, I saw a question about, are we going to add, we get this one every webinar, it seems. I think, are we going to add new Tinkercad circuit components to the editor? And the answer is yes. We're listening, and we sort of accumulate which ones folks are asking for. And we've heard a lot from teachers for a soil moisture sensor. So we're working on that at the moment. So you can hook that in and program that with your Arduino or microbit microcontroller, and simulate you know, an invention that might incorporate those components. But we're always looking for suggestions, so keep them coming and we'll keep working on them.
Well, I'm noticing it's getting dark out where Davidson is right now, and I don't want to keep Joanna, who has school. She has to be in school probably at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Tomorrow. So Daria, were there any more comments or questions before we wrap up for the evening? Some people are saying good night as well. So
there's one more, and I think it's a good one. Are there plans to include a Raspberry Pi?
Oh, we got that one before too. No, we're not gonna, the short answer, no. Because it's kind of like simulating a whole computer on your computer, which is a bigger task than our small team can handle at the moment. But that's a good question. There are some great, like if you try Make Code, you can go on there and simulate some things on the Raspberry Pi. And so there are some resources out there to build some programs on Raspberry Pis.
Perfect.
Well, I just want to say thank you again. This was such a great end to the season. We hope that it also makes you feel closer to the end of the school year as well, and you get a nice deserved break in summer. But we hope that you stay connected with us. I just want to again thank James Develin for being here with us and for continuing to inspire young innovators. Also to thank our young innovators that were here tonight. Thank you for sharing your inspiring stories. And Vicki for providing us with a wonderful framework to really think about how you can take entrepreneurial mindset and even bring it to the next level with Tinkercad. So thank you so much. You've been wonderful participants as well. It's super engaging. I can't wait to read the chat tomorrow morning. It's always fun to read. So thank you so much. And we will see you soon, and take care. Have a good night. And then we get to do our awkward wave one last time. So let's think about how we're going to do it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys. Take care. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.